and a warm welcome to the Captain's Picnic Table, my new podcast, where great leadership meets great food, one story and one sandwich at a time. In this podcast, we invite a guest who has led from the front, whether on the field or in the boardroom, to take a seat at our picnic table and to explore the lessons of leadership, high performance, and the culinary alfresco moments that have shaped them. The show is kindly supported by Fortnum Mason and TTB Sport, two businesses that understand the power of exceptional experiences, whether it's at centre court or the chef's table. For over 300 years, Fortnum Mason have been crafting extraordinary food and drink, the essential ingredients to create picnics that turn any sporting occasion into something truly special. TTB Sport unleashes the power of sport to create lasting impact, whether that be connecting people through unforgettable experiences or simply using sport as a catalyst for positive change in business. Together, these two businesses champion the joy of sport, food, and of course, great company. So to kick this series off, who better than to talk about leadership on and off the field than Sir Andrew Strauss? He was one of England's finest opening batsmen from 2003 to 2012 and was captain of his team. He went on to become the director of cricket for the England Cricket Board in 2015 and has been busy. He founded the Ruth Strauss Foundation, and he's now chairman of TTB Sport and Mindflick, a busy boy indeed who has seen life both sides of the fence. Straussy, a very, very warm welcome to the Captain's Picnic Table.
Giles, a real pleasure to be having a picnic with you. I could think of no one better. Actually, we might get to that later. I can think of people that are better, but you will suffice.
Well, I'm not sure I am because I've got slightly antsy hands. I might be grabbing all the wrong things. So I'm a glutton, as you know. But let's kick things off straight away. Let's imagine we're in the Coronation Garden at Lord's, a place very dear to your heart where you played for Middlesex and obviously for England. What drink and what snack could I get you to get out of our lovely Fortnum Mason hamper just to get this conversation going?
This isn't going to sound particularly salubrious of me. I think I'm going to start just with a nice, crisp, cold pint of lager, actually, Giles. I don't know, you might sort of sneer at me for that, but I think that's going to loosen the tongue, so to speak. And then, you know what? I'm probably going to just accompany it with a cheeky little sausage roll. Nice. And we know that Fortnums do a good sausage roll. So very good sausage roll. And it's simple but effective as a starter, I think. Well, let's crack on. That's a good start. One of the things I loved about cricket as a little boy, and there were many things, but it's one of the sports that really is synonymous with breaking for lunch and tea. At a test match, that's potentially 10 meals that the two teams can eat and the umpires. Is there occasions that bring back memories of your playing days, whether you're at school, university, obviously as you went on playing county and international cricket, where you remember the sense of the player's tea or the player's lunch, because it is so resonant with the game, particularly the traditional game? Yeah, well, I mean, I think as you're making your way up the levels of cricket, obviously the lunch or tea is generally quite simple fare, isn't it? It's sandwiches or a few, bit of cucumber here and there, some carrot sticks, etc. And then when you make it through to playing at Lord's, you get this extraordinary sort of smorgasbord of food, starting with massive great king prawns and then a sort of steak and chips. And we had this amazing pudding called a Louisiana Love Bite, which I used to love when I was playing for Middlesex. I have no idea what was in it, but it was nothing high performance about it in any way, shape or form. But the most amazing thing is when I made my debut, or certainly when I was a second team player, just making my way with Middlesex, they also used to have a bottle of wine for lunch as well. So I know that the senior players, Mike Gatting and John Embry, would just help themselves to a little tipple at lunch just to get them through the afternoon session.
in a high performance world of sport now, does that still exist? Would a Lord's lunch or tea at a test match level, would that still be as delicious as it sounds, or have things changed, or do players have to kind of hold themselves back? Or if you are Mike Gassing, maybe you're given a pass, you're allowed to eat what you like. But for everyone else, if you're sort of seen tucking into the Victoria sponge, might that mean you don't get a bowl in the post-tea session?
Well, I mean, actually these days, every team, or certainly the England team, has a nutritionist. So before you go to any ground, any food that is going to be served has to sort of be ticked off by the nutritionist. That is the sort of one job they have to do. And so mainly it's sort of, it's pasta and boiled chicken, etc. The one exception to that in the whole of world cricket is Lords. And so the Lords is the one time where they allow people to take the handbrake off and get stuck in. And so thankfully Lords still, it is steak and chips, or it's a curry, or it is a fillet of duck. I would never go near duck. I've got to be honest with you. As an opening batsman, that would be something that I would try and avoid. But we used to get stuck in, which is generally, if you look at the sort of speed ratings of the bowlers, they were always just 3 or 4 miles an hour down when we were playing at Lords.
Particularly with the slope as well. That could cause chaos, exactly. I imagine. And tell me, when you were a journeyman county cricketer, say, or there's a lot of life on the road, I know, for cricketers, and you may be staying in hotels, whatever. I know that both of them famously used to have a barbecue, for instance. Was there a food culture within any of the teams you played where people might cook or take themselves off and sort of get stuck in with parties? Or was it more hotel, dreary food, on the life on the road? And did that make it quite tough?
I can't think of a player ever giving a barbecue, to be honest. I mean, I know that's what used to happen back in the day, but it was very much hotel to hotel, a lot of room service. I mean, one thing that I did try and do when we were out on tour was get out of the hotel, and especially when you're in places like India, you go and sample some of the local restaurants, which is, you're sometimes taking your life in your hands, but the food in India was phenomenal. And probably the greatest memory I had was when we were playing a one-day international series in India, and we went to a small place called Indore, which is, I wouldn't even know where that is on the map, but it's a very small venue in the middle of nowhere in India. But somewhat amazingly, this little place called Indore had a Pizza Hut. And we'd been touring around India for 2 months at that point, eating butter chicken for most of that time. And so we thought that as a team, we'd go out and have a team meal at the local Pizza Hut. Which was great. The manager came in, he gave us the sort of the chef's table in Pizza Hut, which I'm not sure there is such a thing, but there was this long table just in front of the main window for the place. By the time we'd finished our meal, there must have been 2,000 people outside watching us eat our pizza, just because cricket is just such a religion there, and it was such an extraordinary thing for all the inhabitants of Indore to see the England cricket team tucking into their meat feasts. So that was probably the most memorable food occasion I had playing for England.
And as a captain, both for Middlesex and obviously for England, and you hear this in other sports, a lot of the way of breaking down barriers between players and getting people together is by food and drink and by blending the team. It seems to me that when you're on tour, though, there needs to be a balance. Like you said, you might want to go off with maybe a couple of the lads and do your own thing or get away from the tour. At the same time, as a captain, you want to make sure that there is collegiate spirit. Was that something you were conscious of trying to give people both the need to be part of the team, but also at the same time have the room, the headroom to get away from everyone else?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of team dinners. I always felt they were a little bit contrived. But one thing I did do when I came in as captain was try to sort of set up a number of dinners with sort of some of the senior players and some of the more junior players in the team, because it's very easy for cliques to form in the team and you stay with the same people, your mates all the time. And so I try to break that down. I remember, going out for dinner with people like Monty Panesar as they were coming into the team, etc. Just really trying to engender this spirit of we're all in it together. And actually we're going to be a better team if we get to know each other better as people. And so, I agree with you. That those moments where you can sit down around a dinner table, you can share a few stories, you can ask different questions of people. You sort of, you are relaxed. You're out of the sort of work mode, so to speak. I think that's where the real juicy stuff happens. And often it would involve a glass of wine or a beer as well. I think that's healthy when you're trying to get people just to relax a little bit.
And you mentioned his name earlier, and it would be so remiss to have a podcast that focuses on food, sport, and leadership. One of the great captains of England and great leaders was Mike Gatting. How old was he? Was he at the end of his career when you broke into the Middlesex ranks?
Yeah, he was. In fact, I made my debut batting with him, and that was his last season. So I played with him a few times on the pitch, and then he ended up taking over as Middlesex coach for 2 or 3 years. I do remember, he'll hate me for telling this story, but I remember a team strategy session that we had. We were on our pre-season tour to Portugal in those days. Obviously not a hotbed for cricket, but it was a good pre-season tour. And we were doing a team strategy session talking about our one-day tactics for that season. And we all went into Mike Gatting's room. He opened the door to run the session just in a towel. And you can imagine what Mike Gatting looked like in a towel. We sort of got halfway through the session and the doorbell goes and it's his room service has arrived. And there's this massive, great spaghetti bolognese. And there was Gat sort of wolfing down a spaghetti bolognese in his towel as we were trying to figure out how we were going to win some one-day games that season. It was one of the most sort of indelibly marked images I had throughout my career.
So we'll move on, but very quickly, is it fair to say that the legend that is Mike Gatting and his appetite is entirely earned?
Yes, absolutely. And on that occasion, he had sort of bits of sort of bolognese sauce sort of just dripping down his chest as well, which was not a pretty sight, I've got to be honest.
Well, let's move now into the more serious, but we are on the theme of leaders, and there's no doubt that Mike was one of the great captains of England and Middlesex. How old were you when you first became captain of, say, Middlesex or England? What sort of age were you?
I was 24, so I'd only just established myself in the Middlesex side, and then my predecessor's captain, Angus Fraser, got offered a job as cricket correspondent of The Independent, and he sort of stepped down halfway through the season, and they sort of looked around the room, and the only other senior player was Phil Tufnell, so they weren't going to give him the captaincy, and so they looked at the youngsters and turned towards me. And I look back and reflect on that. I mean, I really knew nothing about leadership at that point, and I really, I think back to those first couple of years. It was hugely stressful because I was still trying to figure out how to play the game well. And then you had to think about leading all these different people, including people like Phil Tufnell. And so you've got to work out your own method, haven't you, and what works for you.
And as a young man, 24 years old, you've got some huge characters, huge experience. You also have your own self-doubt, i.e. cricket is a lonely, lonely game, as we all know. It requires the player to play for himself as well as for the team. Where did you turn to in terms of trying to find your own leadership style and how to bring out the best in people? What was the process?
Well, I think in those days, I probably made the mistake of thinking that as a leader, I had to be very sure of what we were going to do all the time. And I had to be, I suppose, the ultimate decision maker on everything. Which wasn't actually my natural style, but I felt like that was what a leader was meant to do. And so I think the mistake I made in those early days was trying to be that sort of charismatic, very sort of directive leader. And of course, that wasn't particularly authentic for me, and people saw through that. Luckily, I had a lot of friends and colleagues at that stage who were on my side and wanted to support me regardless. But I think by the time I got through to the England captaincy, I was much more comfortable in my own skin and understood that actually running a team is much more about getting the best out of the others than it is doing anything yourself. And so creating room for people to bring their difference into the room, feel free to offer their opinions, make sure that the environment was very sort of people first. That was always very, very important to me, especially in sort of high pressure situations like elite sport. It's very easy to get drawn into forgetting that these people are human beings and that they're just commodities that have, or robots that need to go out and perform. And of course, we all know that how you're feeling off the park and what's going on in your life has such a massive impact on how you perform on the pitch as well.
And when you reflect back on those years of captaincy, of responsibility in the ultimate team game, I guess, do you think your leadership style dramatically changed? And did you do that consciously, or do you reflect back and go that you were more phlegmatic, you gave people more space later on? Or were there moments where you go, no, I have to change this just didn't feel quite right?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think in cricket where it's tricky is it's both your leadership and your performance. And so when I was performing well with the bat, I think it was much easier because I knew that people were sort of, they were going to follow me and they were impressed by my ability to lead by example, etc. I think when it wasn't going so well, either for me personally or for the team, there's always that instinct that something needs to change. You need to do something different. You need to have a sort of catalyst to shift the performance of the team. And I suppose, there was a piece of advice I got given as a young player that, if you feel like the team needs a bollocking, then you should put your arm around people. And if you think that you should be sort of high-fiving and telling everyone how great they are, maybe that's the time to give a bollocking. So there's that sort of slight contradictory thing that you got to shake people out of whatever they are feeling at any given time and do the opposite of what they sort of think you should be doing. That's kind of, I suppose what you're doing is you're dealing with the ebbs and flows and that incredible roller coaster of emotions that you go through in elite sport.
And do you remember what the hardest decision you ever had to make on the cricket field was? And maybe it was when you were young and you had to make a selection decision or something. Was there something that you got, bloody hell, this is tough, but you knew you had to make it?
Well, I mean, I think there are a number. I think the everyone will remember the sort of time at the end of my career where Kevin Peterson was dropped. I think that was a very tough situation and a complicated one, which we don't need to go into great detail about. But I think it is definitely one of those times where, as a captain, I felt a very strong responsibility to stand up for everything we'd been talking about as what the team stood for, and so. I think that's why that decision was made. I look back with some regrets that we allowed it to get to that point in the first place. I think we could have dealt with that better. So I think that was one thing. The other thing that I thought was really tough, and that this is not necessarily a captaincy thing, but it was when to say goodbye. When to step off the stage. I was still worth my place in the team. I was still captain. The team was still doing well. But deep down, really, I felt sated and satisfied. I felt like I'd achieved everything I wanted to. And so that was a moment that I had to be very honest with myself and kind of say, look,
how long was that period?
I've done my bit.
How long was that period, do you think, when you started to think, this may be me, before declaring that?
Yeah, I think we beat Australia in 2010-11. We got to number one in the world in August 2011, and I think from that moment onwards, deep down, I felt like I'd achieved what I wanted to, and so there was probably a 9-month period where I was sort of agonizing over this, and then, funny enough, we actually lost the number one ranking, and so I had a pretty strong feeling that the team had to sort of refresh, reorganize, and maybe refocus. And I thought deep down I wasn't the person to lead that. So that was the driver of the decision, I think, as much as anything.
Which are brave and very difficult decisions, self-awareness being the hardest of all. Just so quickly on sport before we move on to the business of sport and the leadership lessons and so on. When you look back on your career, were there individuals or an individual who particularly helped you on that journey in terms of getting you to where you undoubtedly got to, whether it be a teacher, coach, family member, that you kind of recall and go, that was an absolute critical person? And did you ever get to say thank you to them?
Well, obviously there are so many people that make an impact over time. The two that really stand out was my coach at school, a guy called Andy Wagner, who really taught me about the game. Everyone talks about technique and, cover drives and cut shots, etc. But he sort of taught me about how the game of cricket actually works. And it's about that sort of managing your game according to what comes at you. So that was really, really important for me. And also he had a lot of faith in me. I think he had more faith in me than maybe I had in myself at that stage. And he encouraged me to give professional cricket a go. And then the second really big impact for me was Duncan Fletcher, my first coach in the England cricket team. A very sort of paternal figure for me, a mentor, a very wise guy, a very clever guy who really forced me to think about cricket in a very different way. He talked about cricket being a game of angles, which I'd never really thought about it like that. But also he gave me sort of just very sage and wise advice on life. I remember when I had my first son, Sam, he came up to me and said, "So, Straussy, are you going to be a good bad parent or a bad good parent?" And that sort of thing, I was sort of struck me for a moment. When okay, and the point being, it's a very easy thing to give your kids what they want all the time, but actually, the really good parents are prepared to stand up and not do that. Pretty simple stuff, but he was just very thought-provoking in that way, and a massive impact on my life.
And when you were a player, you were sponsored by, I think, Vodafone for a lot, maybe Waitrose, I don't know. That's the opposition, not Fortnum Mason. They should have supported the England cricket team, maybe another time. But you had to do, and at Middlesex, of course, you had to do a lot of commercial work, being a kind of, if you like, a puppet but for sponsors in particular. How aware were you of the business of sport, the huge commercial juggernaut that surrounds professional sport? Were you aware, and did you become more aware as you got older about where your life may go beyond playing cricket?
Yeah, I think for long periods of time, we were exactly that, puppets, really. We'd turn up for an appearance, we would say the right thing, we'd be given a briefing document, and off you go. Obviously, we were aware that you had to keep the sponsors happy. You were aware that the TV money was crucially important in cricket. And towards the latter end of my career, I think I became more cognizant of the politics at play. So ICC, we had issues around Zimbabwe, for instance, and also the sort of the domestic politics in the English game. But actually, I think I was pretty strongly left, but pretty ignorant as to how the business of cricket worked. I think after I retired, I worked for Sky for 3 or 4 years and started getting a better appreciation of the role that the broadcaster plays, not just in terms of the money they put into sport, but the profile it gives the sport, and of course how those numbers work, how they find the right valuation for the sport. And then, of course, when I went into sort of run elite cricket and director cricket, and then on the ECB board, I was very much in the middle of both the politics and the commercial side of the sport, to the extent that actually in the ECB board meeting, we never spoke about cricket. It was all about either politics or commercials. And so, became very aware, and, maybe more aware than I care to admit, about the commercial realities of sport and how important it is, or how much emphasis is placed, I suppose, on revenue, on bringing money into the game. And so, that did set me up very well for the role that I've played at TTB Sport in recent years.
And I was going to say, and do you think that many of those lessons of team building, leadership, inspiration, bollockings delivered where required, exhortations, whatever. Do you think that now, as a businessman with successful businesses that you're leading, that you are leaning a lot on that experience as a sports person that will help you in this next chapter of your life?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think when you are leading a team, personally, there are all sorts of different contexts in which you might lead a team, but the principles are still the same. And I would argue the first one is you've got to be very clear on what it is you're trying to achieve. And so, for us at TTB Sport, that is kind of like really clarifying, what we've got the ability to be the best at, what we're passionate about, that sort of why. And obviously what people will pay you for as well. So, it's lifting yourself out of the reeds a bit and trying to be a bit more strategic about what you do and what you don't do. But then more importantly than that, it's about the people. It always comes back to the people. Have you got good people in your team? Do you trust them? Are you all bought into the same vision for the business? And that's where we're extraordinarily lucky at TTB Sport. I think we've got a phenomenal team there. It's a small business, in a tricky industry. You'll know better than me, Giles, how tricky the sports industry is. But very excited about this whole idea of positively influencing the future of sport, and in some ways taking it away from it all being about revenues and the sort of pointy end of sport, and shining a light a little bit more back on the recreational side of sport and the people that turn up on a Saturday either to play or support. How's the future of the sports industry going to reward those people and make sure that they feel included rather than exploited? And I sense to a certain degree that the sports industries have been exploiting too many people for too long.
Well, something that we talk about on this podcast on Are You Not Entertained a lot and have done over the last 5 years is about new sports and adaptation to quote Charles Darwin, is required. And we've seen it with IPL and cricket. We've seen some sports really move forward and others stay where they are, or some maybe try and adapt, golf being an interesting one. And it's a bit of a mess. Thank goodness for Rory McIlroy, one might argue. But I'm really interested, something that you're very involved with as a business is about paddle. And as this show goes out, it'll be, I think it's the Alfred Dunhill Paddle Classic, which sounds like a plug. But for me, what's interesting, as Dunhill, who've been a great sponsor of sport over the years, tried to give, with golf, a bit of a, Johan Rupert wanted to change kind of the face of professional pro-am golf in a kind of more fun way at St Andrews. Paddle is one of the buzz sports in the world. It seems to be growing, and certainly if you're Mexican or Spanish or it's from certain countries, it's absolutely colossal. It seems to be growing like Topsy here in the UK. And you seem to put on an event which is not your classic kind of league format, but it is very much about bringing celebrity and joy. How much have you enjoyed sort of being part of something that is entirely brand new? I think it's only 1 year old.
Yeah, no, it's been a really exciting project for us. I think, when you look at a lot of sports, the approach on a lot of sports is to spend huge amount of money at the top of sport, paying players a huge amount to create heroes, and then hopefully that will drive people to pick up a bat or kick a football, etc. What is interesting about paddle is really a bottom-up sport. I mean, no one really watches the professionals play. I mean, there are some televised events, but it's not mainstream in any way, shape or form. But what we've found with paddle is whoever plays it, pretty much without exception, loves it, and they're low barriers to entry. It's actually quite easy to get quite good straight away. It's very difficult to get very good. And so what we've found ourselves doing with the Alfred Dunhill Paddle Classic is having this unique arrangement of sort of very keen amateurs with celebrities and pro paddle players all playing on the same court and having a great game. And there are very few sports that you can do that. I mean, I'm struggling to think of any other sport that you can do it, really. And so all the while having this great sort of, springtime English sort of summer party vibe and atmosphere to it where, people are having a good time and, drinking a bit of Pimm's and, just really savouring the UK at its very best. And so, it's in year 2. We're very lucky that the weather's going to play ball this week, but we're really excited about expanding that tournament in future years, both in the UK and abroad, because we feel like it's a recipe that just works.
I was going to say, you think this is an international model that you could replicate this kind of event with paddle being in growth in that kind of combination of fan, pro, celebrity all together. That's replicable.
Yeah, correct. I mean, there are obviously some pro tournaments out there. There's some amateur tournaments out there, but I think this is quite unique. It does put me under a bit of pressure because I have to dust off the whites and get out there on the paddle court. And last year we had some very serious fixtures against the likes of Jimmy Anderson and Michael Vaughan, etc. I think this year we got Michael McIntyre playing, loads of different people. But,
you've got to beat Michael McIntyre.
Well,
if you don't
he's
beat
on
him,
my team, so you shouldn't be saying that, Giles. You should be saying Michael McIntyre's be a great addition to your team.
He'll make you laugh if nothing if nothing. And just quickly, I mean, we'll go back to paddle, I'm sure, but I think you just ran the London Marathon. Is that right? I think I
yes.
saw you and you were looking a little sort of unsteady on the pins. How did you go? And I heard someone told me that you had a little bit of you were racing against one of your former opening batsmen for England. Is that true? And who won?
Well, I mean, Alistair Cook was very kindly doing the marathon for the Reece Strauss Foundation as well. But what is irritating about Alistair Cook is that he scored 5,000 runs more than me. I think he got 1200s more than me. He captained England in more test matches. And I knew on the start line that he was going to do far better than me in the marathon as well, because he's a bit of bizarrely, he's a great runner, even though he looks like he runs like there's something sort of stuck up his backside. But he demolished me. He did it in 3 hours 15 or so. And
good Lord.
Unfortunately, I struggled a bit. It was my third marathon, and maybe I didn't give it quite the attention it deserved, and sort of stumbled over the line in about 4 hours, 12 minutes. But it's done.
Well, you did it. And
I'm hanging up the boots, and please feel free to take my place next year.
You did mention that to me. I'm going to have to say that under advisement. I'll have a talk to my physiotherapy. Strauss, I just want to have a quick dive into the Ultimate Picnic, which is actually the part of the show that I'm most interested in. The Fortnum Mason's guys have a product called the Ultimate Picnic Hamper, which sounds amazing and comes with quite a price tag. And it seems to come with absolutely everything. And they are going to provide over this series the Ultimate Hamper for us, which we will sort of pull together all of our guest selection and do something at the store later on in the year. Are you someone? Firstly, what's your sandwich filling of choice for this picnic? What's your sandwich filling? What do you want to see there?
I just worried that I'm not going to be quite as sophisticated as Fortnum Mason wants me to be, but I do love a pulled pork sandwich.
Okay,
very nice. I mean, it could be in a bat, but it could be on a lovely bit of sourdough. Either of those would be phenomenal as far as I'm concerned. Maybe with a bit of sort of apple sauce or chutney as well. That'd be tremendous.
I think you're civilized to an extent that I think that you wouldn't want to put crisps in there. Some people have to put some crisps in this sandwich. You wouldn't, or would you?
I mean, unacceptable.
Okay, this is a tough one. Sausage roll, because you've just eaten one in front of us, which is you've done quite well with the crumbs. But is it a sausage roll or a Scotch egg?
I'll take both. If they're both on offer, I'd probably have one of each. But
you know that Fortnum Mason invented the Scotch egg,
right? Okay,
you didn't know that.
Are you pressurising me to say Scotch egg then?
I'm not actually. I'm siding
your
camp.
I definitely like a good. There's nothing better than a good Scotch egg.
I mean, you can get those ones from a service station, which aren't good.
No, you sort of feel like they got salmonella or something. But I agree with you. A good one with a beautiful, soft egg in the middle is phenomenal.
There you go. I think we're leading you towards the right answer. Victoria sponge or lemon drizzle cake?
Well, I'm more of a Victoria sponge man myself. Light and fluffy, and you've got me.
I had you at Victoria. And I think everyone has a guilty secrets in food. Is there a guilty treat you might sneak into the bottom of the hamper when you hope no one was watching?
Well, I don't have a particularly sort of sweet tooth, but one thing I do, I'm worried about sort of plugging the wrong brand here, but
they'll live with it. I'm certain that they'll live with it.
A little bit of Tony Chocolonely milk chocolate with salted caramel, just one of those bars, a bit like the sort of Willy Wonka bar. That'll do for me.
Well, they won't notice. We won't tell them. I'm sure they're very nice people, and I think they understand. And I think we've already established that I'm not going to be one of your 3 guests to be at this picnic. I might sneak in and pour the rosé when you're not watching. But 3 guests that you'd like to have join you for this ultimate picnic?
I always find this difficult because I sort of every time I think about it, different people spring to mind. But I suppose that's the point of it. Well, one person I'm reading about at the moment, which would be an unusual one, would be Napoleon Bonaparte. I think it's something quite extraordinary for a little kid that grew up in Corsica, who didn't really speak French, to end up being the emperor of France and taking over pretty much the whole of Europe. So I would be quite interested to sort of
see how he did it.
Yeah, exactly. Understand what he was bringing to the party, so to speak.
Okay.
I feel like you probably need a musician in there. And so I'm a big Dire Straits man. So Mark Knopfler, I'd like to have him maybe strumming on the guitar for us a little bit and playing a few songs.
Yeah. And I'm certain he'd love to join you. So that's good.
Yeah. And then the third one, I truthfully, when push comes to shove, I'm a bit of a cricket geek and love nothing better than a sort of very detailed cricket conversation, and I think Napoleon would enjoy that as well. So I'm going to go with Don Bradman, the greatest cricketer of all time, but actually statistically the greatest sportsman of all time. And I'd like to understand.
Did you ever meet him?
I didn't actually. No, I was unfortunately not. But I would just like to get right into the nitty gritty of cricket, of batting technique, and all the rest with him.
Well, you posed me quite a challenge, and I know that Mark Knopfler is alive and well and lives in Chelsea and down on the south coast, but I'm fairly certain that Napoleon and the Don are no longer with us. But I think we've, with a decent Scotch egg, who knows, maybe we can resurrect. Straussy, it's been a wonderful and very fast half an hour. All it's done, I thought the show was going to do this. As people know who listen to this show, I love talking about food and other people's love of food. All it does is make me hungry. But we will be building this ultimate picnic, and some of your selections may come in. It's been lovely to talk to you, but particularly about the leadership and sport and really what was an amazing career as a cricketer, but seems that it's going into really exciting places in the future. So on behalf of everybody at Are You Not Entertained, thank you very much for joining me.
Giles, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.